There's that meme, a few years old now, where a woman at a concert holds up a sign that says, "Your music saved me." The meme is then put next to some sort of music that would be funny to really mean something to someone. It's kind of a limited joke, honestly, but I want to focus on the phrasing of the sign itself. Your music saved me. I want to focus on it because we often talk about art, specifically the art that connects with us personally during some sort of hardship, as saving us. It's the album that gets you through a breakup, or the story you disappear into when the grief is too great, or the poem you hold like an amulet tight enough to dig into your palm. We know that art doesn't save us like a firefighter or Jesus. It does not fend off hippo attacks or warn us of carbon monoxide leaks. And to think of art solely as salve is an incredibly limiting view of it. And yet, it can, in small, crucial ways, save us nonetheless. If you find the right art at the right time, if you bury yourself deep enough into it, it can envelop you in what feels like an embrace, creating the beautiful illusion that it is reaching back out to you. When we think of the art that has been with us through the worst times, there's typically not a specific thing it did to help. But looking back, we cannot imagine getting through those times without it. This begs the question, though. What happens when we do get through those times? I want to talk about 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors, or 999. Massive spoilers for that, by the way. 999 is a 2010 horror puzzle game and visual novel before visual novel meant quite what it means now. It's a game that I really like, and it ranks high on my list of things I wish I could experience for the first time again. From its premise, it appears to just be Saw with more math, but as the plot progresses, it introduces wacky sci-fi elements with surprising emotional heft. And when you've completed it, you see that it's an exploration of art both fascinating and only possible in an interactive medium. The game was released for the Nintendo DS. Wait, that was super out of place. Why would I even mention that? When you start 999, you're controlling Junpei, a college student dressed like Marty McFly who wakes up in what sure seems to be the Titanic. He's there with 8 other people, all of whom say they were kidnapped by a mysterious masked figure. The figure, through a pre-recorded message and calling themselves Zero, explains that the 9 have been brought here for the Nonary Game, a life-or-death gauntlet of escape rooms. The players have 9 hours to get out before the ship sinks, and if any player fails to abide by the rules of the game, it will detonate the bomb placed in their lower intestine. The participants include the siblings Clover and Snake, the amnesiac Stevedore 7, and the dignified older gentleman Ace. I ended the list with him. I wonder if he'll be important. There's also Akane, Junpei's childhood friend that he hasn't seen in 9 years when her parents moved away or something. For Junpei and Akane, it's a genuinely happy reunion, but for the most part, the players regard each other with distrust. The rules imply not everyone can escape, people keep showing up dead, and the fact that Zero's message was pre-recorded suggests one of them may be Zero themselves. They keep playing the game though, and through Junpei you go deeper into the ship, choosing branching paths and solving fun math puzzles. You spend time with different characters who go on apparent tangents, talking about Ice 9 from Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle, or the novel that seemed to predict the sinking of the Titanic, or how, if you were seeing a wireless monitor for the first time, you'd assume it was the monitor doing the processing, not the computer, but actually it's this distant force transmitting its thoughts for something else to display. I ended the list with that. I wonder if that'll be important. Eventually, depending on your choices, you'll reach a bad ending. In one, Junpei gets stabbed while taking the elevator. In another, Clover loses her brother but finds an axe. In the most affecting one, Junpei encounters the crumpled bodies of the other participants before seeing Akane bleeding out alone. Through the pain, she tells him how happy she is to have seen him, that he meant so much to her when they were kids, and she cherished all their memories together, the school trips and snowball fights, and that she really wanted, to make more memories, to keep sharing their life, but now she knows that won't be possible. And Junpei, in panic and grief, lies to her, tells her that of course they'll have more memories, that they'll escape and start a life together, that this is just the beginning. And Akane smiles, and Akane thanks him, and Akane dies. I ended the list with this. I wonder if that will be important. After each ending, you start back over and make different decisions. Through trial and error, you get to the so-called safe ending. A lot of bad stuff happens on this path. Snake is apparently blown up and Clover is verifiably stabbed, but you find a code for Junpei to enter on his detonator bracelet that reveals some crucial backstory. See, the Nonary game you're playing now is actually the second one. The first Nonary game, with the same life or death stakes, was held 9 years ago, and all its puzzles and dangers were part of an experiment on psychic children. Based on the real pseudoscience of morphic fields, the kids were separated into 2 groups in identical but distant facilities. Presented with puzzles and the threat of death, one group, the transmitters, would figure out the solutions and send them telepathically to the other group, the receivers. You could think of it sort of like the 2 screens on the Nintendo DS. The top screen is the receiver's view, passively looking at the puzzle, and the bottom screen is the transmitters, who pass on the solutions to the receivers and have them enter it into the device. Oh, useful metaphor. I guess that's why I specified this was a DS game. Anyway, most of the participants of the second Nonary game, the one you have been playing, have some connection to the first. Clover and Snake were a transmitter-receiver pair, Seven was the detective who investigated all these missing children, and the mastermind behind it, the person responsible for this sadistic experiment putting children in mortal danger, was Ace. Faced with the evidence, Ace admits to running the last Nonary game, and to murdering Clover in this one, but denies being Zero. And then he pulls out a gun. Taking another player hostage, Ace goes off ahead to escape alone. Akane becomes immobilized by one of the fevers she's been having throughout the game, this one particularly severe. Junpei and Seven find Snake alive in a coffin. He had been drugged and hidden there by Zero, but neither has the heart to tell him about his sister. When they confront Ace in the ship's incinerator, though, he tells Snake everything, in sadistic, lurid detail, and shoots him once in the chest. Ace gloats that he has enough bullets left for all the other players, but just as he is about to fire at Junpei, Snake, consumed by fury and vengeance and grief, rises to his feet and lurches towards Ace. Ace shoots him again, but he doesn't stop, and again, but he doesn't stop, and he empties the gun into Snake, but at this point the only thing Snake can feel is hate. Snake holds down Ace as the incinerator prepares to activate. Junpei screams at Snake in vain to save him, and Ace howls as the inferno consumes him. In the eerily quiet aftermath, Junpei wanders the empty hallways of the ship. There's no way out anymore, the incinerator saw to that, but he just wants to see Akane again. When he does, though, she's delirious, cold as death, and seems to know that it's all over. Junpei runs off to find help, finds nothing, and comes back to see that Akane is gone, as if she dematerialized. Zero's voice comes over the loudspeaker, seemingly live. The game ended in a loss, they explain, but it wasn't Junpei's, it was Zero's. With death certain, knockout gas fills the room, the screen fades to black, and the credits roll. Then you're back to the beginning, and things progress as normal. The last ending was so brutal and game-changing, but the game doesn't change. There's this surreal feeling of going through the plot beats again, knowing so much more about the characters and the shape of the story without being able to do anything about it. But then something really interesting happens. Junpei starts to remember the last playthrough. Out of nowhere, as if an epiphany, Junpei remembers the code for his bracelet that reveals everything about Ace and the first Nonary game. He shouldn't know this. You know this, but he shouldn't, and he can't explain how he does. One thing is clear, though. The space between you and Junpei, between player and player character, is starting to dissolve. Now, with Junpei's impossible knowledge, you head towards the true ending. Junpei and the other participants outwit Ace, prevent the murders of anyone who wasn't super evil to start with, and find out the truth. Akane was in the first Nonary game, and everyone who was there remembers her dying. 9 years ago, when her family moved away, she and her brother were really kidnapped by Ace and forced into the experiment, going through the same puzzles on the same ship under the same peril that you have been doing with Junpei. Seven managed to rescue all the other kids, but Akane went back for a doll that Junpei had given her, and Ace was able to trap her in the incinerator with one last puzzle. Akane so close to freedom, but cut off from her psychic brother partner, broken by the ordeal of this game, facing the pure terror of the oncoming flames, couldn't do it alone. She needed help. So she called out to the morphic field for someone to save her, and she found her childhood friend Junpei. Only it was Junpei from 9 years in the future, the one you have been controlling. With this look forward in time, Akane saw infinite branching paths. Most of those paths ended with her burning alive, and just one had Junpei casting his mind into the past to save her. Her memory became a superposition of that one timeline she survived and the many in which she was killed, and the further she went from that one true timeline, the more acutely she felt the fire. So she needed to bring Junpei to the incinerator at the exact right moment when her childhood self would call to him for help. She needed to put him through the same game that was about to destroy her, to manipulate the timelines and see him gutted and burnt and drowned over and over until it all aligned. She needed to become Zero. She needed to orchestrate the second Nonary game. And she needed to put Junpei through it. In the first Nonary game, Akane was an adept transmitter, and having the puzzles before her and the experience of solving them and the need to get Junpei to thread an infinitesimally small needle, she transmitted to Junpei, sending him the solutions in the form of epiphanies. Everything on the DS's top screen has been from Junpei's view, the receiver, passively observing the clues. And everything on the bottom screen, the touch screen, the one that actually plays the game, has been Akane's. The big twist of 999 is not that Akane is Zero, it's that Akane is you. This entire time you have been playing as Akane, controlling Junpei through the morphic field. When Junpei acted out of character, or did something he couldn't explain, or knew something he had no way of knowing, it was because Akane, because you, have been directing him through all these awful timelines in order to realize a better one. Akane is, within the fiction, the player, and Junpei is her player character. You get Junpei to the incinerator, to that crucial place at that critical moment, and you have the chance to solve the puzzle that will save Akane. But here, Akane isn't in charge anymore. She's not the transmitter. Junpei is. So when you find the puzzle, it's upside down. You have to flip the DS around to do it. The bottom screen becomes the top. The top becomes the bottom. The transmitter becomes the receiver. The player and the player character swap places, and for the first time in the entire game, Junpei does something fully of his own accord. And what he does is save her, Akane, both the mastermind behind everything that has transpired here and a terrified little kid. He realizes that he has been manipulated into this, but he saves her without the slightest hesitation or resentment. Or, rather, you do, because at last you are playing as Junpei directly. And by saving that until now, by making this the first time that you and the protagonist are one entity, there is a delirious but convincing sense that you are saving this child's life. It's an incredible scene, one that's led to the bizarrely common player experience of sobbing while doing upside-down Sudoku. It's a culmination of so many of the game's elements, its puzzle box narrative, its meta themes, and its emotional core of Akane and Junpei's relationship. It is an affecting resolution, an act of love that you feel a part of. At the same time, it's a sort of parable, a player character reaching back out to the player in their moment of greatest need. And you are that player character. Through its plot and the liminal space between text and reader, and even the specifics of the hardware, 999 does something I have never seen before or since. It turns you into the art that saves the audience. In doing so, it makes the dynamic of this relationship beautifully and excruciatingly clear. Akane genuinely cares for Junpei. That had never been part of her deception. But she does deceive him, creating this nightmare and piloting him through it for her own benefit. She can only do this because of their connection, because they do love each other, but what she does with that love is take from it. What she takes from Junpei is freely given, and her reasons for doing it are eminently understandable. But wrapped up in the real affection of their relationship is something manipulative and extractive, and as Junpei at last, you feel every bit of it. It's a fascinating dynamic on its own that gets even more interesting on the meta level, because that precise mix of tenderness and callousness is there between me and any art that has ever saved me. All the songs and stories and poems that have borne me through the worst times are important to me, even now. They could only ever come to mean this much by the connection I felt with them. But there's no way I could reciprocate that connection. All I could do was take what I needed to survive the night, to put myself in the story until the story could save me from the flames. And, in substance and tone, 999 perfectly captures both the care and coldness of that act. After Junpei saves Akane, there is, almost, a completely happy ending. Junpei escapes the ship, which was not actually a ship, but that doesn't fit in the summary, with all the game's innocent players alive and intact. In fact, Junpei discovers it was only the people who had made the first Nonary game that ever had bombs implanted in them. Akane had wanted to put Junpei in as little danger as possible. And now she has left the survivors with a car, gas, and Ace tied up in the back seat to be delivered to the authorities. After things have gone so horribly wrong in so many different ways through the game, the ending is almost jarringly good. Except that Akane is not there. In fact, Junpei doesn't see Akane at all after he saves her. There is a psychic conversation, a heartfelt thanks, a poignant memory of their childhood together, and a goodbye. She loves Junpei, but she had spent the last 9 years with a consciousness stretched across timelines, grimly putting into play an elaborate plan to rescue herself, all the while haunted by a cruel and unfair and lonesome death she could physically feel. She is not the Akane of Junpei's childhood. She is not entirely human anymore. She simply does not exist on the same plane as he does. And so Junpei saves the day, makes it out, and rides off into the sunset. But he rides off alone. Because there is one last cruelty within the love you have for art. Think of the art that has meant the most to you, the exact right song finding you at the exact right time, the way it gave narrative to fleeting beauty and made misery just pretty enough to bear. Think of the books that have changed the way you think, and the paintings that have plucked at something in your chest, and the stories that you have wanted to be a part of. Think of what you took from it, for your amusement or escape or comfort or survival. Think of how truly you have loved that art, how fiercely, and how that love has let the art briefly transcend its artifice. Think of how that art has saved you. And then think of how you left it. The ultimate tragedy of a love for art is the tragedy of any relationship. That, eventually, it ends. The story closes, or the creator dies, or the thing in you that's so connected with it in the first place changes. This piece came into your life at the precise moment you needed it, but the nature of moments is that they pass. You will have fond, distant, aching memories of what it meant to you. You will revisit it years later, and may even find it richer than you did first. You will try to share it with people, to capture in summary what made it once so special to you, to experience vicariously their first time through as if it was your own. But it's not. The relationship you once had with it is gone. In the act of saving you, the art ensured you would no longer need it. And now you have seen too many possibilities. You have existed on a plane that it does not. You have changed. But the art, no matter how much you love it, how much it may even love you back, cannot change with you. And so, with nothing but tenderness towards it, you get up and walk away. There is real sadness in this, just as there is real affection. Often, as the audience, we ignore that sadness. We have already moved on to the next story. Sometimes we refuse to leave, latching onto the fandom until we can stand on our own. 999 lets you do neither. Though you have been playing as Akane this entire time, you thought you were playing as Junpei. You began to identify with him. And so when Akane leaves him, it feels at least a little like she is leaving you. She is only doing what you, as audience, have done an uncountable number of times before, taking succor from a story and setting that story aside. When she walks away, she is you, the player, putting the game down. But you are also Junpei, the player character, alone in that game with a love that is only memory. You are both, superimposed, tethered to each other and torn by their separation, and in that tearing, you understand, perhaps for the first time, the weight of the ending. You must leave, but as you leave, you are being left.